Welcome, everybody. We're here for another fireside chat. I'm here joined with my colleague Tiago from Nearform. We're going to talk about transitioning from React to React Native, and what are the key sticky points that you should pay attention to when we're thinking about things about different frameworks and the layout issues and navigation and testing. There's so much to talk about on this subject, and we're going to try to cover as many of them as we can. So stick around to the end because the end we're gonna give a surprise announcement about a React Native workshop that's coming up. That you're interested in that we could, hopefully we'll bring that back. And we're gonna give away tons of interesting resources to help you on your React Native learning adventure. So let's get started. So, Tiago, welcome to this fireside chat. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Tiago. What you're doing, what you're working on, and why you love React Native.
Hey everybody! So yeah, like Cody said, my name is Tiago. I'm a full stack developer here at Nearform. I've been consulting for Nearform for almost 3 years and a half right now. And I've been coding for like the past 10 years of my life. I think it's interesting to talk about myself a little bit. I'm based in Brazil. Fun fact about me, I am your stereotypical Brazilian who really loves soccer and a good Brazilian music like samba. Yeah, and so basically today we are here to talk about the transition from React Web to React Native as a developer.
I guess I could say real briefly about me. I'm Cody Zuschlag, developer relations engineer at Nearform, and I had the pleasure to work with Tiago on a project. We were making a design system, a themable design system with components that are written in React Native, so they could be put into React Native Web, so it could be deployed on a website, or they could be deployed into native apps. It was actually a really cool project. I was pretty excited about that. And if I was going to say something interesting about me, what's the name of the cocktail from Brazil? The
Caipirinha, we have so many.
I have a hard time saying that's the one. I do enjoy those, so that's my connection to Brazil.
You're Brazilian enough already.
Yeah, I'm really close. So, yeah, I got the first part done. So what happened was we were at Nearform, we have like internal brown bag presentations where somebody can come and present a topic that they're really interested in and present that to anybody and everybody who's interested to learn more about it. And Tiago had this presentation that was about transitioning from React to React Native. And I'm usually really busy with stuff, and I have to admit I don't go to all the brown bags, but that one like I really wanted to go to. And the presentation was awesome, and I was like, this needs to be a fireside chat. And I hope, Tiago, that today we're going to talk about some of the great points that you presented in that presentation, and maybe later we can deep dive. Maybe this will be a series, and we could deep dive into some coding examples about that. So I'm really looking forward to this. So let's start with the similarities between React and React Native.
Yeah, I think that's a good start. So basically, when you're doing this transition from React Web to React Native, you have a lot of questions in your mind, right? Like, what is the right path? And to make yourself comfortable, you need to first start with the similarities, right? So I would say React Web and React Native, they have three main points that are very similar to each other. The first one being the React API. So the React API doesn't change from React to React Native, so you can use all the good stuff, right? You can use effect, use state, use callback, use memo, so they work out of the box. There's nothing you need to do about it, right? The second point would be mainly the third-party libraries. A lot of the third-party libraries that you have on the React Web ecosystem, they work out of the box on the React Native side of things. Just to mention a few, a lot of our folks out there use Redux or React Redux, work out the box with all the toolkit, and even styling. For example, style components have a version, almost an extension from React Web to React Native, and native wind would be the same for tailwind. Is also an extension from the tailwind to native wind. So very similar. You might need to do some configuration, but they're very, very similar. You don't need to worry. You're gonna feel super comfortable. You're not gonna notice any difference. We're working on a React native and bring your React Web library. And the third one, I think it's very linked with another topic that I would like to discuss today, which is layout, right? What is layout? Like, how does React Native handle layout behind the scenes? And basically, it uses a layout engine called Yoga, built by Facebook, which makes everything look similar to writing CSS. But you're not writing CSS, right? So basically, you need to instantiate an object called style sheet from React Native, and you're going to create this instance, and you're going to create your styles, like you're creating your classes. Like on CSS, you're going to have dot a container, right? While on the React Native side of things, you're going to have an object and not your, just your CSS. But the main change between, the syntax on React Native style and React Web style is properties. So they are on the CSS are kebab case, while on the React Native side they are camel case. So for example, background dash color becomes background color, camel case. Uh, you know.
I feel like that's so. I feel like a couple of things I was thinking about while you're going into this, and this is just such awesome comparison. But it feels like if you're already making React applications or you're already kind of comfortable doing React, like it's not going to be a huge lift for you to transition to React Native. Like you're going to feel comfortable in that paradigm. Now, as if you've never written JSX or you've never worked in the React ecosystem, like that's going to be a bigger lift. And I feel like with some of the client work that we've done at Nearform, like that's why we love React Native, right? Because a lot of these developers are already working with React, they're already comfortable with React, right? And they can kind of make that transition with a little bit of guidance, right? And to kind of think about these ideas that you're presenting right now, the style sheets, the layout, these important points. It's going to be a transition that's going to feel pretty comfortable, and you can take those React engineers and start having them make a React Native application that is potentially deployed natively. So back to style sheet. Sorry, I got a little distracted because I was just so excited about everything you said. The going from kebab case to camel case, right? And that's just like a JavaScript thing too, right? I mean, if you're doing styled components already in JavaScript, like that's already kind of the case, right? That shouldn't be too hard of a transition for folks.
Exactly. That's why I mentioned before about like bringing your own tools already to React Native, right? Because it doesn't change. If you, for example, if you bring your libraries, for example, like style components, you're not gonna notice any difference. Even the kebab case is gonna keep the same, right? Because you're wrapping your application with style components, and style components is gonna take care of it for you. That's why you always need to think when like you're upscaling on React Native to like bring your own tools to make yourself comfortable, writing this type of code.
Oh, such a good point. Like that's such an amazing part of working with React Native. And you mentioned there's like a Tailwind equivalent for React Native. So I'm a mild Tailwind fan, and I'm a huge Uno CSS fan, which is kind of like a hybrid Tailwind plus plus that you can customize even more. Really cool project. I suggest people go and check that out. If they are using Tailwind, go check out Uno CSS. So what's the React Native equivalent to Tailwind?
So it's called Native Win.
Native Wind. Okay, seems simple enough, right? Good, appropriately named. Wait, I have a sound effect for that. Native Wind.
Yeah, very cool naming. Yeah.
Do you have more? Do you want to talk about style, or can I ask you about layout? Because I'm also really curious about the difference in layout. You talked about the yoga engine. And I feel like the React Native work that I've done, that's kind of a detail, right? Like we don't need to know that it's yoga, but we do need to know that the styling has these kind of subtle differences. It's CSS like. That's what I like to think of. Like you're not writing true CSS that we know and love or hate in the browser, right? But it's really similar to CSS. But when you go to layout, there's also kind of a subtle difference because if I'm going to make a React application, like my basic building block for layout is going to be a div, and I'm going to be using grids or flexbox. What do we do in React Native for layout?
Uh, yeah, so basically, we're gonna have three main differences when writing layouts on React Native, and I would say the first one out of the box, div is equal view. They are the same thing. They are the same thing. You can use them, like exactly as you use div on web. They are meant to wrap things around. That's what all they do, right?
Okay, that's your basic building block.
The basic, the bare bone is gonna always be a view, right? Things are gonna be inside of a view. And the second main point a lot of people miss, and I struggle a lot when I first started writing React Native code, is that we don't have semantic tags, right? You're not writing in web. You're not gonna have your H1, H2 span, So on React Native, everything is a text, right? And you are gonna be the one responsible for styling that text. I know that sometimes on the browser it already has like a H1 tag already comes with a default CSS style, but on the other hand, React Native they don't do this change for you. They don't do the styling. They're not semantic. So also it's good and bad at the same time, right? So the bad part is that you don't have like this default thing, but also you don't need to care about like hierarchy in your code. Like you have a text independent if it's like on the very top of our page or on the very bottom, it's going to be a text no matter what. I think it's a misconception that a lot of people struggle with when they first, like, where are my tags, where's my span, where's my H1? So
Yeah. Where's my H1, my H2, H3? It's just text. And that's where you talked about the instantiating either a style sheet object. So you could have your H1 style sheet object that you're going to apply to the different text tags, right? Or if you're using something like the native wind, you could have your own abstraction of shortcuts or utilities that you could put into the same pieces. Okay, that seems to make sense to me. So good and bad, right?
yeah, and also like an advice that I could give you, because sometimes you have projects that we want to do this transition with our developers, right? That they have like this background on React Web. So I've seen projects before where we had exported elements that were H1. So you have all the styling, and on within your library, your own library, you can export a typography like with the semantic elements. So by doing that, you're not gonna, you're gonna make people's path easier, when working on React Native. That's a really good approach when, handling your own project and creating your own stuff. So, if you want to follow that path, I would, highly recommend. And I think the last topic when talking about layouts is bottom, right? It's we because the user, they need interaction with our application, right? And there's nothing better than adding a button. But like, how do I add a button on a React Native application? And that's another topic that's very painful for a React Web developer, because on web we only have button, right, and links sometimes, but we mainly have buttons. But on React Native, we don't have only a button, but we have touchables, we have pressables, and we have bottom as well. So basically, briefly explaining button on React Native, it's the default button from the OS. So on Android, it's gonna have this Material UI look and feel. While in iOS, it's gonna have this Apple feel, UI. And you're gonna have touchables, which you wrap on views to make a view, pressable. And the most common one, and that's again tip of the day, is pressable. Because pressable, they don't have any custom styling. You can think about the lightweight button that's going to perform the actions that you want, and also doesn't come with any style by default. So, and it tracks like, sometimes on mobile applications we need to track like on long press, or, on press out, these hard things that are not so easy to do with buttons, but with press people, they come with out of the box.
Love that. So like I'm not going to have my div and my on click handler Or worse is sometimes I put an on-click handler on on an anchor tag. Like I'm still trying to figure out. Sometimes I even struggle with that in doing HTML and classic React. But if we're going to React Native, we should be thinking about using the pressable, which is just a view that has it has an event handler. What is the event handler on the view?
So basically, it's on press.
Okay, on press.
Yes, yes, it's yeah. Sorry, touchables are to wrap the views around, and pressable are the the buttons, the raw buttons from React Web, and also it's on press. Another thing that I struggle, it's not on click, it's on press.
That's what I was thinking, right? You got this subtle difference, but once you get your head kind of wrapped around those differences, right? Like it's not like you get to know that, and it becomes second nature, right? After a while, like you don't really think about it anymore. It's kind of the feeling that I have. And if you're switching back and forth between React, classic React Web and React Native, yeah, sometimes there's a little bit of mental gymnastics we have to do to make that change. But once you get the hang, you're looking at a code and you see views and touchable and all that, you're working in React Native. So Tiago, I'm also curious about navigation. And having worked on some React Native projects, I know for me, this is always a topic that we can struggle with as development teams. And I feel my experience is it's more to do with communication and communicating like the differences in navigation when we're thinking about potentially native application versus a web application. So for you, what are the differences in navigation when we're looking at React Native?
So when like talking about navigation, it's very important to keep in mind that we're working in a different platform. So your user cannot have a bookmark on the mobile application, right? So you need to think carefully about the user flow. That's also a tip for our UI designers that are designing mobile application. So this thing about like thinking about like the user flow is going to help you all to build a consistent navigation on the React native application, because mainly on web it's all about like the user experience, how your user access your web, right? For example, I have a banking app, so my user can have a bookmark for the credit card balance page, right? And the flow is going to be completely different for a mobile app where the user needs to log in, find the option, press the option, and go through the entire flow until it reaches the credit card balance part of the application, right? And also on React Native, we have a library called React Navigation, name, a very, very, not
Appropriately named, right?
yeah, well, another library well named. And it has three main navigation types, which are stacks, tab navigation, and drawer. So basically, these are the three ones that rule, application. And I'm sure that everybody here has ever, came across this type of navigation. So basically, stack is this feeling of like you literally see the application stack in the screens top of each other. Tab navigation is the application that have like that tab with options on the very bottom, and the drawer. Usually like you're gonna have a burger menu, and you can press that burger menu that is gonna either swipe from the left or the right. Yeah.
Oh, our favorite hamburger menu. Yeah,
Yeah, same here.
always makes me hungry.
No, but that's true.
Sorry, bad joke.
So and basically you can also within your navigation you can stack more navigation, but again that would be interesting topic for a series in the future where you can demonstrate like how navigation work. But I would say stack, tab navigation, and drawer are the three main topics on navigation for React Native.
Let's make a deal, you and I, right now, that we're going to deep dive on this in a future video. If it's a fireside or maybe it's a technical deep dive, but everybody watching, like we're going to deep dive into that because Tiago has some amazing information about this. And I really love how you put those into three categories: the stack, the tabs, the drawer. I'm thinking I'm typically an iOS user, so the stack is something like iOS loves the stack, right? And all of their native menus, it's stack, 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 stack. So that's really familiar. And when I talked about communication before we talked about that topic, that's what I was thinking. It's something the whole team, from the designers to the product owners to the project managers to the developers, like we all need to have this grasp on the differences of navigation on a native application and navigation on a web application, because it becomes really simple. Like, oh, I just want to have a tabbed interface on my, like I have on a web page. Well, that doesn't always make sense on a native app. And like you said, usually those tabs are at the bottom, and you only have a couple of them because you have limited screen real estate. So communicating those things and thinking about that before you start an application, I mean, that's probably key with any application, but especially if you're transitioning to React Native for the first time. So Tiago, we have just a few minutes left. I don't know. Could we just say a couple things about testing, and we can make the promise to do a deep dive on testing. But if we're going to be testing, a classic React web application, maybe we're using Jest or testing library React. Some of these classic tools that we're all used to. What's the tooling like if we're going to be testing a React Native application?
So basically, when it comes to testing, it's very, very similar, right? Because what we want to do is test our application or our components in isolation, right? So it like you can use Jest and like exactly like you do for the front end for the mobile application. So you're not going to see any difference when it comes to unit tests. They are pretty much the same thing. The main difference comes when you want to do end-to-end tests. So for React Web, we have like Cypress, which is the most used tool for end-to-end tests. While on the native side of things, you're going to have two main options. One is Maestro, the other one is Detox. They have the same premise, but they are going to have some syntax differences. For example, for Maestro, you're going to have a YAML file that's going to give a step-by-step for your application, like, oh, you should press on this button, you should fill up this form, and I expect to have this result, right? So besides the unit test, the only difference that we're going to have is with end-to-end tests.
Okay, makes sense. So we need a deep dive on that, and let's also, I'm going to promise everybody watching, we'll put the links to those frameworks. We'll put the links to all the frameworks that you mentioned about in the description for this video down below, so you can check that out. You should also, as long as I'm talking about checking out links, you should also connect with Tiago and myself on Twitter or on LinkedIn. Sorry, X. I meant to say X or LinkedIn. We'd love to discuss any of these topics in more detail. We'll try to put those links down in the description also. There's so much more to talk about. So the last subject for the conclusion, I'm going to throw a curveball, a surprise question to you, Tiago. Since we're talking about transitioning to React Native, the real question I wanted to ask you is when would you not use React Native? I feel like that's a harder question, right?
Yeah, that's a very hard question. But I believe it all depends, right? So it all depends on your application, in your user, like what your user style, what are like the moment of your company as well. Like if you really need a React application, because a lot of times it's not just about the application itself, but how your user is going to use it, right? It's all about the user. So in applications where you're going to have, for example, a data grid, a huge data grid, that's a red flag. That's definitely a red flag because it's super complex to build a responsive data grid on mobile, not only to build, but also to make something user friendly, right? And another good example of like when not use React Native application or any mobile application is when you have like a lot of complex animations, where you're building a game that needs a lot of interactions. You need to track events on the screen that are happened, almost instantaneously when user press the screen. So I would say on examples like these, you should avoid using React Native and go for something either more native, right, like Swift or Kotlin. And also, I think sometimes just fancy to say that your company has a mobile application, and so you need to think about like, okay, doesn't make sense to make more app responsive instead of creating a new repo, maintaining that repo, making the upscaling of my developers to React Native. So it's all about your project and how you see it in the future and your users. And so it goes beyond the scope of a technical topic, I would say.
Ooh, wow, what a great response to that surprise question that I threw at you. And if I'm hearing you correctly, like if you're doing like a really data driven application where you need to be modeling a lot of data, like that's just hard in general on a small screen. So it's not that React Native is the wrong tool. It's more, are you creating the right application for a small screen? That's something to think about. And you talked about animation intensive applications. If you need that, performance, that native, you're going to get slightly better performance from a native application, right? But you're going to add a lot of complexities into having different languages for the different platforms and the completely different CI pipelines. I was just going to add a couple things in the discussions that I've had with clients in our consulting work at Nearform. If you already have a big code base, it can be it can be a challenge. It's not impossible, but it is a challenge to like slowly integrate React Native into a large code base. So if you're starting over, I like to say a greenfield application, that's a great time to look at transitioning to React Native because you can start fresh. Otherwise, if you are going to transition an existing large web app into React Native, take a step-by-step approach, and the end result, the goal needs to be that it's all React Native at the end. Like you don't want to maintain a complex pipeline. That goes for going from React to React Native and also going from like a native application to React Native. So those are the discussion points that we like to talk about with clients, and it's all about utilizing the resources on your team. You're getting all those advantages from React Native of write once and deploy anywhere, but you still need to have different deployment pipelines. If you're using just a responsive web application, that's write once, deploy once, right? So there's advantages, disadvantages to both. Really depends on your application and the needs, because having that same interface, whether you're on your telephone and a native application or on the web, like there's something really powerful about that, especially around banking. And I'm thinking about online check-in for airlines. Like these are like really classic use cases where I've seen the work that we do at Nearform, where we've used React Native to really go the extra length. So Tiago, I think we have so much more to talk about. Let's talk more about this. I want to thank everybody for watching. We'll get those links down in the bottom. Tiago, do you have anything you want to say to anyone who's thinking about ramping up to React Native? Some words of wisdom before we go.
Yeah, definitely. First of all, thank you very much for having me here, Cody, today. It's a pleasure to be here. Also, just notice for those that are doing this upscaling, we're gonna leave, like Cody said, we're gonna leave all the documentation, on the description, and also we're gonna try to attach some presentation that Cody mentioned early on. And also, I think we're gonna have Cody's presentation about this transition in a upcoming event. So I wanna hear more about it.
Way to bounce that question back to me. That's right. So for everybody watching, come to NodeConf EU 2023. We're going to be giving a workshop from zero to React Native. We're going to give a workshop where we're going to walk people through creating their first React Native application. It's going to be a really great time. I'm going to have a whole handful of experts, React Native experts there. It's going to be a great time. I'm going to try to get that recorded. We'll try to get it on the internet. I'm not going to make a promise to that today, but we'll see what happens. Last thing I want to say before we go is, React Native, JavaScript, these are all community projects. Go get involved in the community, right? These are open source projects where they need your help, and there's so many great people that are out there willing to help you. That's what we love about open source. So I want to just make one open source shout out, like go get involved in these projects and you'll meet some great people and you'll get to boost your career and do all kinds of interesting things. So Tiago, thanks.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon. Cut. So I'm gonna put a little bit of music on.
you know how to dance. You're Brazilian already, man. I'm gonna send your passport. I don't.
I'll stop recording unless you want to do one more dance segment.